Good morning.
Good morning.
Like Nick mentioned, I work for Smoky Hills PBS. We're the PBS station for the western half of the state. And being in public media, budget is always an issue. And because of having a limited shoestring budget, one thing it forced me to do was dig into the public domain, which are films that have been around long enough that they've either passed those legal loopholes where anyone can use them, or old government films that might have been lost to time. And in doing that, you can really learn a lot about the history that we've had and maybe anticipate what's to come, and also just really kind of find some stuff that you will not find on Disney Plus also. So, picture this. It's 1941, the world is at war, armies are desperate for supplies, allies need food, and the government has one question. How do we convince millions of people to change their lifestyles? And it's not soldiers and scientists, it's cartoons. Cartoons became one of the most powerful tools in the government's arsenal. So this is one of the first government animations. This is actually credited as the first government animation. It was made in 1919, called Charge of the Tick Brigade, tackling a pretty unexpected enemy, the cattle tick. Now, this film used animation to simplify a really complex problem, turning kind of a dry agricultural topic into an engaging and accessible story. And of course, we're going to watch a clip of it. This is the silent film era, by the way, so no music. If you don't keep away from me, I'll tell my husband, this cow is saying to the tick. They're running around, the mischievous tick in a little hat. Lay low, boys, here they come. Say when, kid. And then all of a sudden, they're charging. 105 years ago, by the way. We've come quite a long way. Anyway, the ticks get on the cow, chase them away, and then the very best part of this film, this was originally a 12-minute piece, but the whole ending is a tick giving a very sarcastic rant to the cattle owners of America, saying, we want to thank you for giving us all of this free food, which at the time was $40 million worth of cattle were estimated to be damaged by these ticks. In today's money, that's $730 million. So you can imagine quite a problem. But funnily enough, that was not the first government piece. That's what's credited as the first government piece, but actually during World War I was the first government animation and had to deal with food. This is called food conservation, which taught Americans how by eating less meat, wheat, and sugar, they could help the war effort. And this is just a tiny little clip of this piece. So it's a large gentleman eating a huge meal. These are all real posters during World War I. Observe Meatless and Wheatless Day. Those were things. Hooverize for the USA. Eat less meat, Uncle Sam asks you. He doesn't listen. Eats just as much food. That night he gets the meat sweats, gets angry. He has a nightmare where a bull gets mad at him for not, conserving. He wakes up, runs into a wall that says, eat less. Food will win the war. And then Uncle Sam sits on his stomach and guilt trips him for what he's just done. And there's several of these. This is another one where a portly rich gentleman is saying how he wishes he could, win this war and help in some way. I should join the Navy, join the Army. I believe he says he wants to join the Marines as well. Good luck. And sure enough, he's wasting all this sugar, which all the posters said you shouldn't do. And Uncle Sam's going to jump out of that sugar pot and say, you need to save sugar. You have too much. And there's several of these, and this is, the next one is just a tiny little clip. This is a German breaking into a farm where a goat labeled Navy and a donkey named Army kick him into oblivion for trying to steal food. And then Uncle Sam lets all of his animals and corn that the Germans were trying to steal out of the bag and says, yep, this is all about food. If he had this food, he'd win the war. And then, of course, silent film era, some good old lectures. Anyway, that's the first one. Now, by World War II, animation's not like an experiment anymore. It's a proven weapon. And it's not like rinky-dink studios like these previous ones. The big boys are involved. So Warner Brothers was actually one of the first ones to step up. And one of their most famous pieces they made during World War II was called Private Snafu. And we're going to watch a little clip.
What's new?
Oh, nothing much. Nice day.
Nice day for a bombing.
Yeah, nice bombing with it. Bombing with it. Bombing with it.
Sounds harmless enough. Innocent stuff. But let's take a look in and find out what's cooking.
Bombing with her. 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 Just between you and me, pal, I think we're in for a bombing.
The hot air is blowing. A rumor is growing.
They're gonna bomb us. They're gonna bomb us. They're about the bombing. They're about the bombing. They bombed us. Did you hear about the terrible bombing last night? Well, I heard it on good authority.
Balloon juice. It's foamy, but it makes nice bologna.
So good. And so Warner Brothers made a ton of these. This is just one particular private snafu. There's private snafus about how not to get malaria, how not to write any woman you're seeing back home about what's going on in the army because loose lips sink ships. This is one about rumors. There's a ton of these. Most of them you can still find on YouTube. Highly recommend. But it wasn't just Warner Brothers. Disney really stepped up. One of their first was called The New Spirit, which had Donald Duck teaching Americans how to pay their taxes for the war effort. And then you have Victory Through Air Power, which was just this epic aviation thing talking about World War II. And the Seven Dwarfs even showed how you could defeat malaria as well.
We can start by cutting the weed where the mosquito lays her eggs. This makes it easy for the fish to get in and eat the wigglers. Spraying oil on the water is a sure way of killing mosquito larvae of all kinds. The oil enters the breathing tube and promptly kills the wiggler. Those are wigglers, Dopey. Give them the oil treatment. That'll kill them.
So maybe not the best advice for these days, but still some effort being made by Disney. Now, obviously we know war isn't just about soldiers, planes, taxes. Food is just as crucial, to the victory. And without it, armies would obviously fall very quickly. So that's where animation stepped in once again with two of the most powerful and famous animations of World War II. Out of the frying pan and into the firing line, and food will win the war. And I'm going to sit down because we're going to watch both of these. We don't need to talk about it.
Don't throw away that bacon grease. Housewives of America, one of the most important things you can do is to save your waste kitchen fats, bacon grease, meat drippings, frying fats. We and our allies need millions of pounds of fats to help win the war. For fats make glycerin, and glycerin makes explosives. Every year, 2 billion pounds of waste kitchen fats are thrown away. Enough glycerin for 10 billion rapid-fire cannon shells. A belt 150,000 miles long, 6 times around the earth. A skillet of bacon grease is a little munitions factory. Meat drippings sink Axis warships. Waste frying fats speed depth charges on their way to crush Axis submarines. Your pound of waste fat will give some boy at the front an extra clip of cartridges.
Do you still have the bacon grease, Colonel?
Pour your waste kitchen fats in a clean, wide-mouthed can. That's right, not a glass jar or paper bag. Please strain the fats through a kitchen sieve. Keep in a cool, dark place so it won't become rancid. When you have a pound or more, take it to your neighborhood meat dealer, who is patriotically cooperating. He will weigh the fat and pay you for it.
So you want weenies instead of money? Okay, catch 'em.
Save waste fats to make explosives. Look for the official insignia in your meat dealer's window.
So I love that one. And that was actually one of the most effective campaigns in all of World War II was this cartoon. It had a very measurable effect on the collecting of grease and fats. And then this is the best one. This is called Food Will Win the War, and I'll let it speak for itself.
Aflame. All the peoples of the United Nations are fighting the savage enemies of freedom. In many lands, towns are ravaged, countrysides laid waste by ruthless Axis hordes. Farms, cattle, and crops have been destroyed. Ruin, destitution, hunger stalk the helpless victims of the cruel aggressor. But in their darkest hour comes a light of hope, a light that must grow stronger and will grow stronger. It is the hope of American agriculture. Though this nation must fight to keep invaders from its own shores, its farm lands are abundant, greater even than the areas of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, Portugal, France, Switzerland, Great Britain, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Belgium, Holland, Yugoslavia, and Greece. And spread over this vast land are the farmers, their wives and their children. 30 million, twice as many as the Axis has soldiers. Grim farmers with sleeves rolled up, ready for sacrifices. These embattled farmers are armed. Their weapons are the panzer forces of Food's battle line, farm machinery, battalions of combines, regiments of trucks, divisions of corn pickers, potato diggers, planting machines, columns of milking machines, and all these machines kept in repair by farmers and their sons under the stress of war. These farmers pouring out bumper crops to fill many a bare cupboard. The farmer with his wheat crop for this year, 52,800,000,000 pounds of wheat. If all this wheat were made in the fall, there'd be enough to snow under the entire German Panzer Army. Looks to me like another Russian winter. Or if all this flour had been baked into bread, there would be enough loaves to build an Egyptian pyramid, and another, and another, and another. Placed a mile apart, they'd stretch the length of the Suez Canal. Supposing this flour had been made into spaghetti. Look at the sweater you could knit. Just a snug fit for old Mother Earth. Corn, 2,850,000,000 bushels. If all this were grown into one huge ear, it would make a bridge from London to the Black Sea. And that hangs right over your head, Adolf. Soybeans, 160 million bushels. Ground into flour, it would make a loaf that would fill Red Square in Moscow. And it has double the nutritive value of meat. Potatoes, 30 billion pounds. Just about twice as high as the Rock of Gibraltar. Some potatoes. Here we have the Matterhorn in Switzerland. And this year's crop of tomatoes, 1,800,000,000 pounds. Vegetables, all kinds of them. There'd be enough to cover the wall of China. 1 billion bushels of them. Yes, and we're producing vitamins and food concentrates packed with enough power to bowl over the Axis nation. That was vitamin X, boys, just to mark the spot. Fruit juices, billions of gallons. If pressed from our fruit crop of 35 billion pounds, there would be enough to keep Old Faithful Geyser gushing for nearly 4 months. Or if all the fruit were made into one enormous pie, it would measure 25 miles in diameter. My, what a time a pie thrower could have with that. Milk, 125 billion pounds of it. If all this flowed over Niagara Falls in a steady stream, it would generate enough electricity to light every factory in New York for 1 hour. And besides, we'd have enough to give our children free milk with school lunches. Or should we turn this milk into butter, war-flooded fields of Holland could be reclaimed by dikes it would build. And if made into cheese, it would make a piece equivalent to this much of the moon. Just imagine a fire made from 4 volcanoes the size of Vesuvius, and a griddle 500 square miles in area. That's what it would take to broil the 30 billion pounds of meat American farms are producing. This little girl grown plump on a diet of our 11 billion pounds of fats and oils would outweigh 100 super dreadnoughts. And what's more, she'd black out all of her limbs. American hens are busy too, laying 50 billion eggs. If all these were made into one huge fried egg, it would cover all of the United States and Canada. And don't forget to have enough bacon to go around it. And here come the pigs, 100 million strong. Just think of it, 2 pigs for every person in Great Britain and Ireland combined. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Not the farmer of the United States who works and sacrifices to fill the holds of victory ships. Ships turned out by men and women working night and day. Ships that must be fought through dark oceans where submarines lurk. Ships guarded by aircraft, more and more of them. Ships protected by the blasting fire of men of war. Ships loaded with food for freedom, produced, fought through, and delivered to all who fight for the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from what? Freedom from fear. Under this insignia is shipped food that will win the war.
All right. So this is interesting because these films defined a generation really, and a lot of them have been lost to time. There's much more than these two. And we kind of have to question now why they worked so well. And I think it's because they made the abstract personal. You know, we're not just producing this much milk. It's enough to, if it was in the Hoover Dam, it would power New York City for a few hours. It's considerable. 1/8 of the moon in cheese. It's really just kind of like putting it in someone's head in a different type of way. And also, you know, people didn't feel lectured to. They felt inspired by it. It was a different way to kind of approach these issues. And I think the takeaway really is like, you know, storytelling when kind of paired with creativity is really capable of solving some of the most daunting challenges that we have. And when we look at what water might look like in 10 years, what climate is doing, we could maybe use a little less lecturing too, and maybe a little bit more nice stuff like this. Maybe Disney, again, could redeem themselves. And one last quick thing. So this is something that was on the first cartoon that the United States government ever made, since it was a silent film. Your cooperation is the measure of your American citizenship. I just think that's a really powerful way to put that. And maybe we've lost a little bit of that as well. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. That was great. Pretty darn entertaining, wasn't it? And just a bit cringy at times. But, you know, I'd like to think we've evolved a little bit. So, any questions for Max? Any thoughts? Max, by the way, is the producer of the Real Ag program on Smoky Hills PBS that we underwrite, that we are proud to underwrite, I should say. It's a hell of a program.
Thank you. Last week's episode on hemp is fantastic. If anyone wants to check it out, just go on YouTube, Real Ag Hemp. Really fascinating story kind of behind our country's history and that plant. And now it's bailed us out more than a few times, and maybe we should give it another chance, especially here in Kansas.
The week prior to that, the week prior to that featured our board member, Jason Schmidt, dairy farmer from around Newton, Whitewater. That was another fantastic episode. So, any questions for Max? Any thoughts from what we just saw? Let's get the lights up, by the way, Tom. Thank you.
This microphone.
Any thoughts? Any questions? Yes.
On this, yeah, definitely. The Inter-American Continental Association that Disney actually produced a ton of films for, trying to kind of like shape what Latin America's food system would look like. It didn't work, but a lot of the films are still there. Internet Archive, if you're familiar, archive.org, if you search for some of them, are still around. And it's another thing I'd love to do a piece on, but even though these are in the public domain, Disney doesn't love when they're shown, so I don't risk sticking them on TV. So definitely worth a dig on your own, for sure.
Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
I read a biography of Dr. Seuss recently, and he was one of the people. I was amazed at the Hollywood name, the big names that were involved in these, especially World War II films and the things that they did. Frank Capra was another one.
Sure.
That ran the studio, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And John Wayne, you know, everyone talks about Ronald Reagan doing his acting for World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing what they managed to do. So my question is, why, instead of just having, what's her name, the singer, Taylor Swift, instead, why isn't somebody in like our organizations doing or trying to do some of this? Is it cost, or is it lack of personnel or creativity, or what?
That's a great question. I think a large part of all of the resources and effort that went into World War II is because it was seen as a major crisis, especially after Pearl Harbor. That changed everything in American culture and American media. You can notice the shift in newspapers after that event. You can notice the shift in film, media, cartoons, everything. And I think maybe it's because we haven't reached that crisis point yet, where more people don't want to get involved, or there isn't that pressure. Which is interesting, because I'm sure, as everyone in this room knows, what's going on with drinkable water in this country is pretty terrifying, where you think someone might want to stand up and begin to say something. Unfortunately, I think a lot of these ideas are seen as kind of like extreme leftist, even though they affect everybody. And people, I think a lot of people who are famous and in media are scared of putting themselves and tying themselves to one issue and becoming that person, even if that's needed. So yeah, I would love that as well. Yeah?
It's my opinion that the cartoons can work for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just easily label them the good guys and bad guys.
Sure.
And right now, social media pretty much has replaced cartoons, and I think we certainly see a lot of effect of the bad guy on the social media, whether they're coming from Russia or they're coming from Iran or coming from North Korea or whatever. They've certainly had a huge impact, significant impact
Definitely. Yeah, I think the spread of memes has been very politicized. There are ones that come right from the far right, and then from the far left, and it is difficult to navigate. It's such an opinionated, crazy world we live in, especially with media. You're right, especially when there's no sources to any of the stuff online most of the time. It's a quick headline, it's a quick something, and then people take it as read. I read it somewhere, it's a fact. Yeah.
How do you think the consumption of these cartoons and animations played into it? Where today we're constantly scrolling on social media, we're in front of a computer, around it, but these were probably consumed before a movie at a theater in this era.
Oh yeah, shown in schools.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this was mandatory viewing. I mean, like you said, there were 2-3 channels, and you could bet something like this was on a couple times a day, and you might get shown it in schools. On top of it, it might be in your movie theater before a movie. There could be a string of 6 or 7 of these things at a movie theater, and it's free to go to for everybody. It's changed so much, for sure. Yeah, there's a ton. Really, I mean, you can look at every major studio, and someone was involved in some way or another. It's that whole crisis point. Everyone's got to do something, because if we don't have a country anymore, we're not going to be able to make money off of our cartoons. So might as well make a few for free or for cheap. There's one more. Yeah.
From the data that you've looked at and the success rate during the periods where they were shown, do you feel that we could make or have a change in consumer behavior at this point in our lives, if in where we are today, with bits and pieces, educating our youth, having a concentrated effort, and if so, what topic for Kansas would you tackle with this type of medium?
Yeah, I think public media needs to be funded for that reason. I think it's one of the last pieces of media that isn't heavily politicized. NPR has done an amazing job over the last few years, I feel like, when there were plenty of options to pick a side, not picking a side. As far as something we can make for Kansas, boy, I look at water out here, and I look at pesticides as well. Personally, I think we need to have a long, hard conversation about atrazine specifically. That seems to me, from the data that I've seen, a pretty open and shut conversation that we can certainly find an alternative to. I don't know if that's a youth-focused topic, except for that meme again of Alex Jones saying it's making the frogs gay, which is coming around again, because Kennedy actually said he's going to get rid of atrazine now that he's Trump's new guy. So it is weird to navigate. I mean, it's very confusing as well. You have someone like Kennedy in this new administration who people don't know how to read, has said plenty of things across all the political spectrums. It's all getting media, and it's kind of up to us, I guess, it's up to us to kind of judge everything and be careful with what we consume and what we believe, I suppose. Yeah, water, I guess, as well. I mean, water is huge out here, obviously. Water pollution is getting to be a weird thing in Kansas that doesn't get discussed. Some of these large CAFOs and employing migrant children to work in these facilities, that's not getting reported on. So there's lots for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
The way that they simplified the science, and nobody is doubting that science, that you can take bacon fat and make glycerin and use that for your bullets. There's no doubt in that train. And yet today, we've got all this science doubt that's kind of baked into the system. So that is really good about taking all that out.
Yeah, just showing that this makes a bomb. Look at it explode a Nazi tank. Done. Yeah, simple. But I mean, I think that's the attention span of, I mean, my generation and younger seems to be that. I mean, TikTok is even a bit much for me, and I'm old now. Seeing that, like, God, you have 8 seconds to catch someone, and that's it. We can't go through the science of making a bomb with glycerin. You're right. It's just quick, quick, quick. I mean, I think the essential one now is, like, it takes water to make the food you eat. This is how much water. You know, I think the key one for Kansas upcoming will be how little water it takes to produce mushrooms as a protein source, as well as beans. I think that's going to be huge for this region in the coming years.
Like the man said yesterday, it takes a semi-load of water to produce 2 bushels of corn.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a meme right there.
Yeah, the one that I always think about is it's about 1,700 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef, and I believe it's 340 gallons to produce 1 pound of beans. And obviously we're not going to replace meat in this country, that's not what I'm saying, but there are ways we can cut back and replace it with something else. And funnily enough, if you look at old World War I and World War II newspaper headings and what the Department of Ag was saying, there are headlines like, please use beans to replace your meat consumption. Beans are just as good as a protein source. Swap out any meat recipe for beans. With no doubt. You say that these days, there's a podcast going like, this is why this is stupid. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about, it's not complete protein, da-da-da-da. It's not true. You know, and that's the other thing is there's a lot of confusion on that. I just saw, there's now Elon Musk, you know, for all the, you can argue the good that he's done. Now he's turning into a strange climate denier as well. And he's like a major figure in media. We got to be responsible in who we believe and who we believe it from, for sure. Was there one more? Yeah. Oh, cool.
But CAFOs didn't exist before World War II. The public, the farmers and ranchers were overfeed your animals to get more animal fat. We got a taste for that grain-fed steak that never went away. That's what actually started the movement toward CAFOs.
Fascinating. Yeah, one of the pieces we did on dairy last week was about how during World War II, there were also all these films talking about how important local dairies was, how it's, I mean, it was like milk is bullets is the phrase that was used. You know, white gunpowder was another one. You know, it was a huge part in the war effort. Even if you look at the Civil War, you can argue that the Union had a larger advantage over the South because they had a more consistent supply of dairy to supply their soldiers. You know, I mean, milk's been the backbone of this country for a long time. But in 44, there were, in 1944, there were 5 million dairies. There's 19,000 now. I mean, we lost 5 million, essentially. It's a completely different world. And yeah, with the CAFOs, that's, I'm not sure if anyone's aware of what's going on in North Carolina in some of those counties with those pig lagoons, but that's a pretty scary thing as well. Cool? Oh, one more.
That water you're talking about that is taken to produce all these products,
Mm-hmm.
have you talked about the recycle part of it that goes on manure, or the rest of it that goes back out and gets recycled? What percentage of that water is accounted for?
Yeah, so right now, all of the water data is coming from water footprint, and there's a gentleman named, oh shoot, what's his name? I spoke to Kai Olson Sawyer. He's an amazing water reporter that's done work with several different water organizations. They're working on that full use picture now with the recycling aspect of it going back in. But that's just the current numbers off the current water footprint.